Morning, New York. Hey, I was waiting to do that one, right? Okay. Facility of the future will not necessarily be a facility. So when I read this one, I'm thinking no bricks and mortar anymore. You know, I'm not building a facility. I'm thinking, which direction is this going to be taken? You know, the old tech transfer, I'm always used to going from the lab to a facility. So what does this seem to be? McCoy, why don't you start off? What's your vision on this?
A facility that includes more compact, miniature equipment that can be redeployed, that can have flexibility of process in the industry. It's a much more efficient way of operating in today's environment where the blockbuster drug of yesterday is not here. We're seeing more smaller drug substances, more smaller dosage forms, sometimes as small as 100,000 doses per year. So it's it doesn't lend itself well with that short patent expiration date and the small manufacturing to building large stick-built facilities.
Well, McCoy, I'm thinking too, it's, you know, if I'm going to want to put a facility in a particular country, I just roll this pod into a aircraft and fly it in there and I'm in business. I mean, is that pretty much what we're thinking about now?
Russ, that's a very astute. That's one of the main advantages. A number of regions and countries now have the in-country manufacturing requirement. If you want to offer pharmaceuticals in a country for sale, you need to manufacture, you need to employ. The advantage of the modular system, the portable, continuous, miniature, and modular system that GEA is working with our partner GCON Manufacturing, is the asset can be assembled in a factory, it can be qualified in a factory, and then as you said, it can be redeployed very quickly as a validated, completely functioning system to an emerging market or to a small market country. It's actually an excellent application of the portable, continuous, miniature, modular facility.
Thank you. It's actually a wishful thinking, guys, because, you know, I can tell you I've spent way too much time in places I didn't really want to be. So if we could have flown it there, I would have been a lot better off. McCoy talked about personalized things are going to be small, and so what's your take on the personalized medicine then, Clark? I mean, do you see this playing into this no more facility kind of thing?
Yeah, what we're starting to see in a lot of requests that we're getting from clients right now is to start working with them earlier in the cycle. When they're going through their compliance and developing the drugs and so forth, because as they go through the clinical trials, they want to have a facility that goes through that with them, and then when they're ready to go, they want to have these multi-sites. There's framework that they're working on with the FDA right now, and the FDA is trying to get through on the cellular therapies, the genome therapies and so forth, so there's a different regulatory pathway for facilities. A lot of it's, once a client gets a BLA, they want to be able to have multiple sites all making that same drug essentially at the same point, and they're working through that framework right now. And I think cell therapy is really pushing the edge of the envelope for them because, you know, you get into this mix between compounding and drug manufacturing.
Let me ask you this then. So the concern is always, having been in the industry myself way too long, but the concern is always I launch a product and we fit it to the equipment we got. Invariably, two things happen. The market plays out or the market drops dead. So I'm stuck with scale up or scale down. So with this facility and this modular approach, I mean, what are you thinking here? I mean, are we going to start to see stuff that you can turn on more or turn on less? What's your take on that?
I think my take on that is the pharmaceutical company can look at these modular clean rooms more as a piece of equipment that you can reconfigure and not so much of a brick and mortar asset that now what do I do with it? I got to dispose of it. I got to sell it to someone. But the main thing is that you can reconfigure it for the next product that's down the line. And that may be just changing it from a biological safety level 1 to a 2, or it may be as simple as just, you know, cleaning it up and moving it to your next site that you want to use it at.
So when we move these things in, they're all rigged out, ready to go. It's not just a room that we put equipment in, it comes set up. In other words, everything's been done?
There are utilities you need to bring to them. There should be some separation from the facility as far as the modular zoned approach to clean air. You know, you don't want to hook it up to a dairy barn. You've got to have some sort
Although
of...
people try,
yeah.
I'm sure.
But other than that, yeah, that's true.
So
Very minimal.
So, you know, Clark, I was thinking, no, I mean, I can almost envision one of these pods showing up next to a hospital that's doing gene therapy and oncology. I mean, is that kind of where you see this going?
I think that's where it's kind of heading right now. I mean, because I think the validation of the transport chain and chain of command of somebody's blood or so forth is really expensive. I think FedEx and UPS and some of these other logistical companies are working on that, but having continuous monitoring of the person's product is a very expensive thing to do because you have to have satellite, you have to have wireless, you have to have all this data stream. And I think that's why there's two approaches. You either increase that logistics chain and really get that validated out, or you get a BLA in one type of small facility, and then you go ahead and transfer that BLA into multiple sites. So it's more of that McDonald's approach or Ford approach. You know, when you go to McDonald's, you know you're getting the exact same quality hamburger at multiple sites. But in drugs, it'll be similar to that, where they'll have multiple sites making it the same. And that's why they're working on that pathway right now. There's still a lot of regulatory that they have to go through on how you're going to measure and pull samples from multi-sites and test those on a personalized medicine model.
You know, we've lived with SUPAC for many years, and I think it's probably one of the more functional things we did as an industry. You know, we can say that, be that as it may, it had certain criteria for doing a site transfer. And to me, you know, if you wanted to open up something in the third world, and you take this module or podule and you fly it there, other than the geography, nothing has changed. So to me, I think what we've done is we've reduced the regulatory burden. But having said that, I mean, the environmental stuff like that, I'm sure we're going to still be, these things are not standalone per se. They have to be inside of something. Is that, do I have that right, Craig?
You generally would like to put them inside. We're looking at putting them as extensions to the outside of the building, but I'm not sure the market's ready for that just now. That's a little too radical.
Yeah.
So yeah, put them inside, and like I said, just bring the utilities to them, and there's no difference between where you left the factory and brought them to your site. But there's also another advantage to these, and that is you may want to bring these to a facility that's, let's say, closer to headquarters, put the process in at headquarters, bring your people there from where you're going to manufacture to train them, and then move the whole, after the training phase is complete, move the whole facility to your manufacturing site.
I see. McCoy, is that what you've seen? Everybody's pre-trained in one, and then, you know, that's where FDA always seems to be able to get you. You know, okay, yeah, it's identical right down to the screws. However, you know, the guys are not trained in the same manner. I mean, what has been your experience?
Well, Russ, I think there's 2 points here that you've hit upon that are very advantageous to this type of modular design. The first, of course, is you mentioned SUPAC. I think the industry now is moving toward a more ICHQ-10 risk-based approach to qualification and validation, rather than the old 10-to-1 SUPAC guidance, which is what the GEA continuous processing consigma system is designed to do. You don't build a bigger system. You simply, as you mentioned, run it longer or run it for more capacity. So I do believe that with the modular system of today, the portable continuous miniature modular system, you're able to bring your operators, bring your standards to bear during the initial factory acceptance test, during the original training before you actually ship the modular system to the final site. Thus, when it arrives to site, your operators are pre-trained. Your operators have pre-existing experience with the system, so you're minimizing the startup cost. You're minimizing the time, as you mentioned, of the home engineers spending in emerging markets, the sleepless nights, the wasted product. My goodness, if you can avoid the scale up, if you can avoid the product transfer from site to site, you're saving tens of millions of dollars just in API cost.
Right, I agree. You know, Clark, the reason I asked the question, one of the things that, at least from my standpoint, that the guys in solids and more standard dosage form learn from the guys in bioform is that you scale out, you don't scale up. If you see what I'm saying, we would, you know, right now I think the approach, and we figured it out finally, is that you clone the process, right? So in other words, it's either a clone of an identical process, or you make the process a hybrid, where you turn it up, where you turn it down, depends.
There, right now, from like a process standpoint and what's going on, you know, single use has driven a lot of what goes on, at least with what we work with at Biologics Modular. So that process, depending where you scale it at and what you're using, you know, we're getting a lot of people that want to be in that sub 1,000 liter process. Well, you know, years ago, those processes didn't make any money in the market. Nobody ever looked at it.
Right.
You know, and we're having discussions with companies that are bringing online commercial grade at 10 liters for some of these cell therapies. I mean, that's their production.
Gotcha.
And it's that small now.
Yo, Craig, I got a question on that along the line. Actually, it's directed at both of you. One of the things we always heard is our assets for bio were fixed. In other words, if we got, you remember this stuff back with the flu vaccine and all? It was that if we had to react, we didn't have the infrastructure to ramp up. You know, I'm wondering how realistic that is in light of the strides we've made in this modular stuff. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's some strides have been made in that way for the, especially down at Texas A&M. They're working on the pandemic influenza facility down there.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand there's still a ways to go out there as far as pandemic diseases, as far as having the facilities for it. And we believe that these are, at Walker, we believe these are some of the pieces of equipment that can help solve that problem. Because we do believe it's scalable, and we're actually seeing a lot of people asking questions on how you scale systems between 50-liter batches up to 2,000-liter batches as they get into height issues and things like that. And there are ways of doing that with raised areas for like a 2,000-liter bioreactor. And we're also seeing a lot of interest in, and this pains me as working for a stainless fabricator, but we're seeing a lot of interest in the flexible, disposable bioreactors and things like that.
Yeah.
I look at it and I see it solves certain problems, like you don't need the steam sterilization utility for your site to do that. But on the other hand, you've got 2,000 liters of product that's in a bag.
Right. Right.
I don't know. Does that worry you? I don't know what it costs. You know. So the answer is it depends, I think.
Well, along these lines, I mean, one of the things that I've always found, and with the biologics, all right, is that you notice we've been talking about the reactor and this reactor and that. I think in a lot of cases, at least in my experience, is that the dosage form seems to get kind of lost in the sauce here. You know, in other words, you got to fill and make the injectable dosage form. Is that something? So in other words, it's modular to make the biologic, right? Is that follow now with the aseptic fill and, you know, filling, because obviously to put it into the dosage form and compound it if necessary. So is that something that is now integrated, fully integrated here or not? You follow my logic here,
yeah.
Right?
We've done some initial layouts of fill and lyophilizer lines into mobile clean rooms. We haven't built any of yet, but we see no reason why they cannot be in there. And I'm thinking of dose rates of like 250 vials a minute.
Okay.
Facilities. We have not laid out anything that's really high speed, but 250 is still pretty good.
I would think. Would you agree with that, Clay? I mean, we're right in the zone on that? Or
Yeah,
what?
I mean, we focus on smaller scale at our company. So we're in the smaller pieces of manufacturing. So like if like box filler systems, there's companies like VanRx and a few others that have an already completed isolation system. It's kind of turnkey. They just need a room to put it in to operate it within. Those systems I think will get more popular. They are smaller. They limit by scale, but if you have multiple of them, you can run different lines at different times. You have a lot more parity when you're going into making drugs, whether you call it infectious disease drugs, treatment drugs, or more personalized medicine drugs. But you can also, I mean, I think a lot of the discussions we're having with clients right now is they want to move the in manufacturing closer to that patient. That's where it needs to be, and they can see it there. They're
Right.
just trying to think through, you know, as simple as like a CMC filing, you have to have an address. Well,
Exactly.
you know, and when we brought that up to the FDA through CBER, we said, you know, do you need an address now if you have this kind of system?
And what do they say to that?
It's an open discussion.
Yeah.
So,
Just to let you know,
We'll think about
we
it.
got burned on having the wrong zip code one time, so
Oh,
don't think it's gonna be an easy road.
oh, no,
there.
no,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think it is either, but I think it's things, a framework, as
Yeah.
things evolve in manufacturing, you have to look at the regulatory framework too.
Absolutely, but see, to me, that's it, you know, I mean, the biologics, I think it lends itself to it. To me, you know, if you're gonna do that in this room, it makes sense to fill and finish it in the next room. It should be an integrated facility, as opposed to the stuff that I'm used to dealing with. You know, the drug is made someplace, somewhere else in the world, put it in a drum and I get it.
Right.
All right, but having said that, McCoy, a lot of these modular systems, they're fully, and again, sans the active ingredient, but they're fully integrated, right? I mean, it's raws in one end, finished out the other, or how's it work?
Russ, that's once again, that's a very perceptive comment, and that's one of the real true advantages of the GEA portable continuous miniature modular system, is to be able to take, as you pointed out, maybe a primary processing element such as the bioreactor or the fermenter, and then couple it as needed with adjacent pods for the fill and finish or for the compounding. And as your needs change, or as the demands change for manufacturing, you can interchange pods to move out. Maybe you go to direct fill, you go to a localization step, those sorts of things. Just by interchanging the pods, if they're located on a central backbone, a central corridor with the main gowning, degowning material flow, the concept that we're working with right now with two of our pharmaceutical partners is a pod farm concept where there will be shared space, and the utilities, the backbone, the infrastructure, and the personnel will all be shared amongst a number of companies, and you'll be able to interchange pods for different functions depending on your need.
All right. You know, I had another question. You know, you hear a lot from the guys in the industry saying, well, they don't want to make a big spend up front. You know, in other words, you know, what if the thing's not going to have the uptake? Problem, and one of the pushbacks on that has always been, well, if you don't do the work in the beginning, you do the work at the end, but what happens if something goes wrong? QBD was supposed to fix that. Operative word there was supposed to. Okay, so my question to you is, in this particular case, you know, the commercial and the clinical manufacturing, to me, there should be almost no line between them anymore. I think a lot of people in today's day and age, they wind up launching clinical material, right? Oncology drugs, I wager a bet that if it's a capsule that's out there, it's a clinical form. That wasn't necessarily planned. So having said that, what do you see now when you guys are working on stuff? Do you still see people developing clinical pilot plants and manufacturing plants, or are they all one and the same? What's been the experience there, Craig?
We see a lot of them in the clinical phase, because I think it's more recognizable that this technology lends itself to clinical batch sizes versus larger ones.
Yeah.
So I think it's starting there. Scale up on it. Sometimes they think of these for larger systems, and sometimes they're thinking, once I've got it ready to scale up, I'll take it back to my traditional brick and mortar factory.
Okay.
Kind of depends on what they have available for their own facilities.
So, you see, that's very enlightening. I think, well, Clark, I mean, your sweet spot is small scale. Is that did I hear that right? So I would think that for flexibility, a lot of people got to be focusing on that. And small scale screams clinical to me. So what do you usually do?
I mean, that's basically what most clients that we have are looking for, is that 3,000 square feet less, total process, delivery, and handling. From a scale standpoint, you're obviously seeing a lot of drugs that are getting smaller since you've gone to this orphan status pathway, and now we're seeing where people are moving down the statistical model, looking at things like Lou Gehrig's disease and things before that were almost unprofitable. Now with the technologies in manufacturing and the science that's really moving, they're able to go after these other diseases, and the goal is to help them make it financially worth going after too, because that's how you get to it. It's a business case at that point. And so what all of us have kind of done in our business is we've changed the accounting processes of how this is, because it used to be a TI build out for your clean rooms and so forth. It was part of the building. Now it's a separate depreciation schedule and so forth, so that allows them flexibility on a financial basis.
Yeah, that's a great point. I tell you, Clark, you always tell the techies, I always miss that part, except when I got hammered at the end of the month, So, but I guess to me, it's got to be, the process has got to have a rheostat on it to be feasible. In other words, if tomorrow the market demand is high, you wind it up. If tomorrow the market demand, you wind it down. What has been your experience, McCoy, on that? Has anybody shared their regulatory strategy on the non-facility modular scale up, scale down thing?
Well, Russ, that's actually one of the significant advantages of going with continuous processing rather than the batch. As you know, and as we've discussed, if you need a flexible batch size, as either the market grows or the market wanes, or maybe you have a new strength or new presentation that needs a small amount of batches, it's easy in a continuous system to run it a little longer or a little shorter and then reconfigure it or redeploy it for another formulation. So that applies to continuous manufacturing in general, and most especially to the modular concept, because as Clark pointed out, with the new therapies, with the new drug substances that are coming about, there really is a small volume required. We're seeing very, very few, in an OSD environment, oral solid dosage environment, we're seeing very few products that above 1.5 billion tablets a year. So that lends itself very well to a small compact facility.
I'm thinking a couple of things actually. I'm a big fan of I think it and again I think it simply came from spending way too much time in places I didn't want to be, but the question really comes back to, I think it just makes perfect sense. I mean, that's the best of all the worlds, right? It's modular or modular. It's either a continuous or a hybrid being somewhere in between, and that lends itself to me is ease. All I got to do is, like what you said, Clark, all I got to do is change the address on the made by and the label. Right? But having said that, I think, how much does the environmental effect have? I mean, in the biologics world. Is the pod built so that it totally insulates from, or is there resident flora? I mean, it seems to me that all this other magical stuff that there's always going to be the guys doing the what ifs. Is there anybody lurking in the weeds out there, assuming that the modular approach we take in bio? What would be your guess there?
Well, I mean, if you kind of look at what's going on in the industry now, one of the biggest issues that drives it's not just the benefits we provide with our products. All three of us have different products, but they do similar type functions. What's driving a lot of business to us is not just how good our product is, but how bad construction overseas is, and all these other things that are out there. I mean, talk to guys that run global engineering at some of these places, and they're doing projects in third world countries, getting quality subcontractors, getting all these things that are out there, because they're all moving this product more globally. You know, in vaccines, you have to do a certain amount of in-country manufacturing to get qualified under the World Health Organization. Well, easier said than done if you need a quality manufacturing platform to start from. And so that's what's driving. I mean, I want to say, oh yeah, we got the greatest product in the world, and we've got all the benefits, and everybody should buy our stuff. But it's what the problems are in the market that are driving this.
So Craig, let me ask you this. Have you been approached by any large-scale health providers? In other words, you know, let's just say, like Mayo Clinic, they decide they're going to install a pod.
We have not. We have not been approached by anything on large hospital pharmacy.
Yeah, it would just seem to me, based on what Clark's saying, somebody's got to be thinking about it. You know?
I know there's some work. The Texas Medical Center down in Houston does some work at A&M in a pod on personalized medicine. Again, it's off-site. It's at Fuji Biotech site. It's not in Houston, but they've got to be thinking about that. It's 60 miles away.
Yeah, I got you. I had another question, McCoy, on your process. Have you noticed people shying away from tablets, capsules? It's the old story, you know. Every year, a couple of the capsule guys come up and they say, you know, capsules are quicker, faster, better, cleaner, and everybody else pushes back and says, well, they're more expensive. What's been your sense of it? I mean, you obviously been working with this. Where's the oral solids been moving lately?
In our observation, the convenience of oral solid dosage forms, whether tablets or capsules, has many advantages and far outweighs some of the other more costly and less convenient methods of dosing the patient. We don't have a real preference for encapsulation versus tableting. Obviously, our sweet spot is oral solid dosage tablets with the GEA Consigma line, but we have integrated other methods of dosage form into the Consigma, and it really depends, once again, Russ, on customer preference and the drive for flexibility. You can't always predict, Russ, what your final dosage form is going to be, especially for your next generation product. So with the GEA Consigma line, we've built into flexibility the modular approach to redeploy and reconfigure the asset. You mentioned it a minute ago, and that's one of the major items that we're seeing here with the GEA Consigma Portable Continuous Miniature and Modular is the rapid depreciation. We can depreciate it now as an equipment asset and put it on an accelerated depreciation timeline. So the old days of 30-year depreciation for a facility are no longer applicable to the modular system.
Gotcha.
You can write it down in 10 years, which is more in line with actually your expected product life cycle before your product goes generic, before you start getting competition, as you mentioned, it dies.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask you this now, as we're coming around, I'm going to try to wrap it up here, but let me ask you. To me, I would think a lot of to make this happen's got to be a lot of stuff's done up front. But having said that, we all know that everybody retrofits. So, having said that, what's been your experience? Do they usually come to you with an existing product and say, gee whiz, I want to put this into a modular system? Or what's been your experience, Craig?
Our experience with that is we have not seen that happen yet, because we're seeing, my experience with that is people, once they have a validated system, they're not touching it unless regulatory makes them touch it.
Right. So
it would only be if regulatory said, hey, you got to change this, you've got to upgrade it, and then they'll start talking.
So your clients are from Discovery, or how does that work? I mean, just give me a sense of where you plug in.
Yeah, a lot of ours are from Discovery.
Okay.
They are.
How about you, Clark? I mean, what's been your experience there?
I'd say most of what we're seeing out there right now is all, new process, not retrofitting. I think people looked at that, and I think, revalidation, recommissioning, all that just it was difficult.
Yeah.
You know, you either have to, these hybrids I think will exist, and people are starting to work through that right now and validate those where you have this split. I mean, it's really beyond us. It's more down to the manufacturing process where they're switching over from stainless steel systems over to more of a single use, or merging the two in processes. And we're
Right.
starting to see a little bit of that. Then you'll see the merging of the stick build facility with the modular as that develops. But the process has, that whole thing in the process has to develop first, then the
Right.
facility will follow with that.
I got you. And McCoy, I think it's obvious to me. I mean, why would they, you know, they have to have a plan before they come to you. I mean, clearly. I mean, it's either going to be one way or the other. I mean, so how does this work for you?
Russ, we have a very healthy mix of existing product lines and new chemical entities. It's one of the fundamental designs that we at GEA looked at with the Consigma continuous processing line. We wanted it to be able to plug into a so-called bin-to-bin system where you would not have to go back and retrofit your dispensing and your secondary handling after processing into a continuous format. The Consigma bin-to-bin system integrates very seamlessly into an existing product line with a more advanced QBD, ICH, Q10 risk-based validation strategy. We aren't locked into the old 10-to-1 and the old site transfers and all the old SUPEC guidance. With a more advanced and a more sophisticated approach, we have a good healthy mix of existing products in the Consigma line and new chemical entities.
Well, I want to thank you guys, Craig, Clark, McCoy. It was an excellent
Thank you, Russ.
opportunity. That takes care of our first.